Okay. Well, we will see who pops in to this video in the first place. But figured we can do work on the review for now until questions pop in. So, starting off with just classifying solids. Remember, you want to name them based on their bases if it is a prism or a pyramid, but when it has a circular base, then that's going to be one of your special names. So in this case, it is a cone. Now, technically, this cone only has the vertice at the top, which is Y. Z helps name it. And then mathematicians kind of argue about whether or not there is an edge on a cone or not, because technically edges are when two flat surfaces meet each other, but obviously a cone does not have a flat surface besides the bottom. So with that, some people will just say one edge, some people will say no edge. I personally will just say one. But then our base would be circle Z, and we just name it with a circle and a dot. Nothing fancy there. So then with B, classifying the solid, we want our vertices, edges, bases. And so since this all meets at one point, we know it's a pyramid and the base is a square. So this is a square pyramid. And so then the vertices being basically all of the points that are like a corner would be all of the letters. And so we'd have A, B, C, D, E. Oops, doing that. And then edges, you would have quite a few. There'd be 8 of them, but you would have A, B, B, C, C, D, D, A, and those are just the ones around the edges. And then you have to get the ones to the top. So A, E, B, E, C, E, and D, E. And so then our base would be square A, B, C, D. Okay. So, from there we have multiple choice. So for starting off with naming this solid, we have the base, which is a hexagon. And so because it's a hexagon and it meets at a point, that would be a hexagonal pyramid. And so then looking at the number of vertices the solid has, you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So then there would be none of the above. And then how many edges does the solid have? You would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And so again, that's going to be at none of the above. And then how many bases it has? Well, it's a pyramid, so it only has one base. Okay. So then the type of solid that a shoebox is, if you think about it, shoebox looks like that, and that is a rectangular prism because you have two bases that are rectangles. And then a type of solid for a can of soup. Well, cans of soup, which they might be taller than that, but they have two circles on them, and so that would be a cylinder. For 7, your 3D figure that can be made from a net. You would fold up these little hexagons, and since there's 2 hexagonal bases, that's kind of your hint that it is a prism, and it is a hexagonal prism because there's 2 of them. The rectangular pieces don't matter as much because that's what wraps around the hexagons themselves. For number 8, the shape of a cross-section formed by the intersection of a cone and a plane parallel to the base. If you think about it, with a cone, you would have it something like that. And so if I had a plane intersecting parallel to that base, that would be like this. And so that circle would still be there. And so then that would mean that we have a circle cross-section. For number 9, classifying, we would have a prism because there's 2 bases, and so it is a rectangular prism. How many and what shape are the bases of the pentagonal prism? Since it is a prism, we know that there's going to be 2 of them, and since it's a pentagonal, we know there's 2 pentagons, just like that. And then for number 11, your 3D figure that can be made from the net. Again, we have 2 circles that would be our bases. And so if I have circles for my bases, that means it is going to be a cylinder because cylinders have the 2 circles. Cones only have the 1. Okay, so actually getting into volume now. If we have this right prism, remember volume is just your base area times your height. But since my base is the 16 by 4, we can have 16 times 4, times 6. And so then you pull out your handy dandy calculator and you get 384. And you do not have to divide by anything when it is a rectangular prism. That's kind of the nice thing with these. So moving on down, with the right cylinder, we are going to have our volume times the base area, or volume is base area times height. But because it's a cylinder, our base area is pi r squared. And so given the picture, our radius would be 4. So we would have 4 squared, and then the h is 12 because that's the distance between the bases. And so 4 squared is 16 times 12 is 192 pi. And because it says round to the nearest hundredth, be careful to not just take that answer because we do need to multiply by pi. But iPhone calculator doesn't like to turn sideways. Times pi. And that would give us a volume of 603.185. And so rounding to the nearest hundredth, that 8, looking at the 5, would tell us to round up. So it would be 603.19. Okay. So then, moving on down to 14, we want the volume of the oblique rectangular prism. Keep in mind, it doesn't matter that it's slanted. That's oblique means that it's just a slanty one. So since we are going to find that volume, we're just going to have volume is base area. So 7 times 2 times our height, which is 3. And so 7 times 2 is 14 times 3. 14 times 3 is 42. And that would be miles cubed. Okay. For 15, if I want to find the volume of a cube with edge lengths 0.75 meters, I would just have that side cubed. So then we'd have 0.75 cubed. And that volume, let's see, 0.75 cubed is 0.421. So then that would just be, oh, we're rounding to the nearest tenth though. So since we have 0.4, that would just be 0.4. And that would be meters cubed. And keep in mind, it is the 0.4 is smaller than the 0.7 because you're taking 3/4 of that 0.75 2 more times. So you are making it a smaller number. For 16, since you have to find the volume of the regular octagonal prism, remember you have to kind of look at just a slice of this octagon. And so if I were to just draw that triangle out here, to get this angle, remember you do 360 divided by your number of sides, and that gives you the big angle, technically, of like the entire slice. But then you divide it by 2 to get the angle that you need. So we would just have this 22.5-degree angle. And then since the full length is 10, I know that half of it would just be 5. And then my apothem would be my unknown side. And so with that, I would have tangent. So I would have tangent 22.5 equals opposite 5 over apothem. And so then because the A is in the bottom, we can use math magic. So the A and the tangent just swap places. Boop. And so then when you divide those, 5 divided by 22.5 tangent is about 12.071. But because we're looking for volume, we're going to have to plug that in. We'd have 12.071 times the perimeter. So 10 times 8 would be 80 all over 2. And so without rounding, you just hit times 80 if you still have that 12.071 number up there. And then dividing by 2 would give you a volume. Oops. That's just my base area. What am I doing? I forgot to multiply by my height. Times the height, which is 15. So with that, times 15, that would give us 7,242.64. So in case I messed you up at all, the 12.07 times 80 is your area of the base, and the 15 is your height. So remember that volume is just base area times height. And make sure you're following the formulas, because as you can see, it's easy to accidentally forget something. But since it's 7,242, that would be C. And we would be good with that. Okay. So then for 17, we want it in terms of pi and rounded to the nearest hundredth. So since this is a cylinder, we're going to have volume is base area times height still, but that just becomes pi r squared, which would have, oops, if my diameter is 8, my radius would be 4 because it's half of that. And then my height is 2. And so then 4 squared is 16. Times 2 is 32. So we would have 32 pi. And then, wait a second. Pi r squared, h. Why is 32 pi not an option? Okay, so we probably made a mistake because that's weird. Because our base area is pi r squared, pi times 4 squared. Strange. Anyways, so then with that, 32 times pi, hold on. That gives us 100.53. And so hundredth, we're good because it's 530. So then that is yards cubed. Boop. And so because it's 32 and obviously it does not match any of those, then that's going to be your none of the above. Okay. So then for 18, to find the volume of a cylinder with base circumference 18 pi feet and height of 10 feet, first we use that circumference so that we can solve for the radius. And so since circumference is 18 pi, we just plug that in for C. And then we divide by 2 pi to simplify it out. And so then 18 divided by 2 gives me 9 for the radius. And then I already know my height is 10 because that was given. So then to find volume, we would have pi r squared times h. And so my radius that we just solved for is 9, and the height is 10. And so then when we multiply this out, 9 times 9 is 81, times 10 would give us 810 pi. Or if we multiply the pi in, would be 2,544.690. So then looking at our options, we would have answer C as our answer for that one. Okay. So then looking at the pyramids, remember the formula for these is that it is your volume times is your base area times height divided by 3. And so looking at this base, it is 7 times 6. So that base area would be 7 times 6, which would be 42. And so then that would be 42 times the height, which is 8, all divided by 3. And so then 42 times 8 divided by 3 on the calculator gives you 112 inches cubed. And so that would be answer choice A. Oops. If my pen wants to work, there it goes. Okay. So from there, we would have our volume of this cone. And so we would start, volume is still your base area, but in this case, base area is pi r squared times height divided by 3. So my radius in this case is 5, and so I would have pi times 5 squared times height, all divided by 3. And so when you pull out your handy dandy calculator, that would be 25 times 21 divided by 3 to get 175 pi. Oops. Or if we multiply the pi in, 175 times pi is 549.778. So rounding to the nearest hundredth, that would be 549.78. Okay, so then looking at the answer choices, that would be option B. Okay. So then for number 21, we would have, well, this one is a slant height because this 100 goes to the side of the cone. And so with that, we would have to solve for our actual height by using Pythagorean theorem because that it makes a little right triangle. And so then we would have a squared, and actually, if you want, you can just call it h. So then you can say h squared plus 28 squared equals 100 squared. And so when you do 100 squared minus 28 squared, that gives you h squared equals 9,216. And so when you take that square root, boop, 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 you would get that h is 96. And so then to finish this one off, you would have your pi r squared h, because it's your base area times height divided by 3. And so our radius, we already know, is 28. And then our height is 96 because we just solved for that. And then we are dividing by 3. And so 28 squared times 96 divided by 3 gives me 25,088 pi. Or when we multiply pi in, it is 78,816.276. And so again, we look at the 7 since we're rounding to hundredth, and that 6 tells us to round up. And so then that would mean we have answer B again. Okay. So for 22, the volume of this sphere, oops, we are going to have 4 over 3 times pi r cubed. And so since this 16 is a diameter, my radius would be 16 divided by 2, so that would just be 8. And so then I have 4 times pi times 8 cubed, all divided by 3. And then you pull out that handy dandy calculator. 8 cubed times 4 divided by 3 gives us 682.66 repeating pi. Oh, wait. Yes, I did divide by 3. Times pi. Which gives us, when we multiply pi in, 2,144.66. So that would be answer D. Okay. So then for 23, finding the volume of the sphere, we're going to use the exact same formula. And so in this case, though, my radius is 9, so I would have 9 cubed. And so when I put that into my calculator, 9 cubed times 4 divided by 3 would give me 972 pi. But of course, we need to round to nearest hundredth, so we multiply that number by pi to get 3053.628. And so since we are looking for a hundredth, we look at the 2. 8 tells us to round up, so that would be 3053.63, which, as you can see, is answer B. Okay. So then, going on to the radius of a sphere with the volume 36 pi cubic inches, this is really just testing your algebra skills. Volume is 4/3 pi r cubed, and so we know it's already 36 pi, so we can just plug that in for the v, and then it comes down to, can you get the r by itself? So to do that, you would first multiply by 3 so that you can cancel out with the one that's getting divided. And 36 times 3 gives you 108 pi. And so then I'd have 4 pi r cubed left. And then I would divide by 4 pi. Because then the pi's cancel out. And 108 divided by 4 would give me 27. So then 27 equals r cubed, and then when you take the cubed root, that would mean that r is 3 inches. And you can always check by plugging it back into the formula and getting the same number that they told you, but it does work out to be 3. And so then, last but not least, finding the volume of the composite figure rounding to the nearest tenth, we would have to find the area of the cone first and then the area of the pyramid. So starting with the cone, it would be volume is pi r squared h divided by 3. And so then my radius, because my pyramid is 3 by 3, I know my radius is 1.5 because it's half of the 3. And so that would mean I would have pi times 1.5 squared times the height of the pyramid or the cone, which is 4 divided by 3. And for now, I would just leave it in terms of pi because 1.5 squared times 4 divided by 3 gives me 3 pi. Okay, and so from there to get the pyramid, we would do our base area times height divided by 3. And so in this case, our base area is just 3 times 3, so that would be 9. And then the height is still 4, and we are dividing by 3. So 9 times 4 gives me 36, and dividing by 3 gives me just 12. And so then, because I want the volume of the entire thing, I would do 12 plus 3 pi, which again, if you can put this all into your calculator without any rounding, then that is your ideal case, but I know that it's kind of hard sometimes, so I get it. But when you do that, oops, I did not do it right though. 3 times pi would be 9.424 plus the 12 we just solved for would end up working out to being about 21.42. So because we are rounding to the nearest tenth, that would be 21.4 feet. And so we do not have that, unfortunately. And so for us, that means that it is none of the above. Okay. So that's just a really quick walkthrough of the review. Even though you guys are not going to be having a test anytime here in the near future. But that's just a quick recap of everything that we have been doing. So if you have not already seen the other recording that was done earlier today, that has a walkthrough of the 11.3 and 11.4 worksheet. And really for geometry, at least in class, we don't really have to worry too much because when we get back to school after all of this shenanigans, we will probably have a day of just review, and then we will have the actual test the following day. But because it's not super active right now, we are going to be logging off. If you have any questions, please let me know, but either it makes a whole lot of sense or nobody's around, so it is what it is. But we will be back on for geometry on Wednesday at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. We will also be live on YouTube Tuesday and Thursday, same times, except it'll be more focused on Algebra 1. But if you have questions, feel free to join because, as you can see, we need to have a party, and we can't yet. So we'll get there, though. It's all good. But signing off now. We'll see you all later. Have a lovely day.